Hey guys! All right, today I'm going to be reading you a book and demonstrating my thinking while I'm reading about character. Okay, so remember when we are studying the characters of a book, we're looking for how the character changes or develops through interactions with others and through events. So as I'm reading, I'm going to be asking myself the process questions to decide what influences are changing our character or changing their values or changing their thinking. And then I also need to decide who my main characters are and who my secondary characters are and important events that will influence them. The book that we're reading today is called The Lucky Star by Judy Young. And it's set during the 1930s in the United States, so it's set during the Depression. So that's a little background. All right, we don't have much, Mama said, but remember there's always someone who is worse off than you are. So count your lucky stars that you've got what you've got. Mama was always counting her lucky stars. Papa was one of them, and Ruth and her little sister Janie too. Their little house was a star, and so were their clothes and the food on the table and even the fact that they had a table. Mama's sky was filled with stars. On summer nights, sitting on the front porch steps, she would point up to the sky and say, see that lucky star twinkling up there? That one is for the cool breeze that keeps our house cool today. And that one over there, she said, pointing to a different direction, I'm counting that one for the shoes that the neighbor gave you. All right, from the first page of this story, I see that I know who my main character is and who's some secondary characters. So it's all these people of this family. So Ruth is going to be my main character. Ruth goes in this bubble, and I'm going to label this with protagonist. The protagonist is the main character of our story. And I already see that Mama is going to be an influence on Ruth. I see that she has Papa is a secondary character, and Janie, her little sister. So I'm just going to record these. I'm already going to add an influence because Mom is definitely influencing Ruth. And I do that by pointing an arrow from Mama to Ruth. And I'm going to say that she encourages her by pointing out the blessings that they have around them, whether it's the cool breeze or the food on the table. I'm also going to put some things that are influencing Ruth that are not characters but events. I'm going to say that the Depression definitely has an influence on Ruth because it's causing them to not have the things that they need. So Ruth looked down at her feet in the old brown leather shoes. They were scuffed and creased and the bottoms were nearly worn through. Baleen twine laced through the eyes of the shoelaces. When the neighbor handed them to Ruth to try on, Mama said, count your lucky stars. They're too big for you. You won't grow out of them for a long time. Okay, I'm going to put the shoes on here as an influence the neighbor, giving them shoes. I don't know if that's important yet, but I'm going to record it. Ruth didn't see Mama's stars. Her sky was big and dark. Pitch black. For Ruth, there were no lucky stars shining down on them. Ruth was 10 years old and was supposed to be going into the 5th grade. But it was 1933 and the Great Depression had swept the nation. Millions of people were out of work. Millions of families had very little money for food and clothes, and there was nothing left for luxuries. September was just a week away when Ruth found out that the school was a luxury. The town could not afford to pay their teachers anymore or keep the school building lit and warm. Ruth would not be going to 5th grade. Count your lucky stars, said Mama. That you were the star pupil in the last spring spelling bee. Ruth looked at the collection of big books, the book of knowledge written on the spines in shiny gold letters. They sat in the place on their shelf above her bed. Papa had built that shelf especially for the books. They were her prize for spelling the word perseverance in the spelling bee. Ruth knew all about perseverance. It meant to keep trying, even if things were hard. These times required a lot of perseverance. Mama looked at the books too. You can use them to keep up with your studies, she continued, until they can open the school again. Thinking to myself that school is so important to Ruth, it's obvious that this is something that she considers very important, and the fact that the school has closed is definitely an influence on Ruth. Ruth knew Mama was trying to cheer her up. Ruth loves school, and Mama and Papa were proud of her. You're going to be our shining star, Ruth remembered Papa saying one time. You'll be the first in our family to graduate from high school. And Janie, said tickling Ruth's little sister, will be long before you shine in school too. Ruth took one of those big red books off the shelf, trying to hold back tears. By doing well in school, she dreamed she would become the brightest star that glittered in Mama's sky. But now that light had been shut off. How am I going to continue my studies without a teacher? Thought Ruth. Janie reached out for the book and Ruth handed it to her. She watched as Janie curled up with it on the bed the two sisters shared. Janie was supposed to start school this year. How was Janie going to learn to read? All right, I'm going to change that influence that I put. School closed is also an influence for Janie and Ruth. So I'm going to move that here. Because that affects both sisters. Ruth looked at Mama, and she knew she was trying to think of another lucky star. Ruth loved her mom, but she knew Mama would not be able to teach her. Mama had not gone to school and did not know how to read or write. Papa could have taught her, but he had been all the way through the 6th grade. But now he was not there to help. That had just been another star that had turned black. Like millions of others, Papa had lost his job. He had worked at the lumberyard for years, but with the bad times, people stopped building things, and the lumberyard owners could not afford to keep him. Both he and Mama found odd jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads, but it had become harder and harder to do. One day last April, Papa came home excited. He had a job. It was the Civilian Conservation Corps that the President Roosevelt had developed to give young men jobs, and had hired the Papa because of his experience in the lumber industry. He would train and supervise young workers coming into the Corps. The whole family was excited. Now they would not have to worry about becoming homeless like so many others were. But the good news brought sadness as well. Although Papa had a job, he would not be able to stay at home. He would be sent off to work at a camp hundreds of miles away. Papa said he didn't like the idea of being away from his family, but he would be paid $30 a month, and then he would send 25 of that home for them. Count your lucky stars, Mama said upon hearing the news. With the money you make, there will still be a home for you when you come back. But when Papa went away, it felt like another star burned out of Ruth's sky. I'm going to add a couple more influences. Papa is influencing Ruth because he left to work at the Civilian Conservation Corps. So he is gone. Mama influences Ruth because she can't teach Ruth or Janie Now Mama took the book from Janie, who had fallen asleep. She placed it back on the shelf and walked into the kitchen, and Ruth followed her. I got a job, Mama said, so I'm going to be gone every morning. You'll have to take care of Janie. Now I need to make biscuits for my lunch. Ruth sat down at the table and watched as Mom mixed flour, shortening, water, and baking powder together. She sprinkled a little flour onto the table as Mama kneaded the dough. Ruth ran her finger through the flour on the table. She was glad that Mama found a job, but it didn't cheer her up about school closing. While the biscuits were baking, Mama and Ruth walked out onto the porch and sat down on the steps. The sun was going down, and soon the sky would be filled with dots of light. They sat there quietly watching the orange and red sky. As the colors faded, the first tiny star began to twinkle ever so slightly. Mama pointed to it. See that star? That star is dim now, but watch it. It will grow brighter. That star is you, Ruth, and you'll be the lucky star for Janie. And don't worry, I know there's a lucky star out there for you too. It'll come, just with time. With that, Mama kissed Ruth on the forehead and went into the house. Ruth sat and looked at the star. As the sky darkened, it became brighter and brighter. Ruth thought about what Mom said and wondered what she meant. Once the sky had completely darkened, Ruth went into the house too. She lay down in the bed next to Janie. She watched the star through the window. Just as she was about to fall asleep, Mama's words whispered into her head. You will be the lucky star for Janie. Ruth looked at Janie, sleeping peacefully beside her, and smiled as an idea became as bright as a star in her mind. Mama left early the next morning. Ruth helped Janie get dressed, and then she started fixing biscuits for breakfast. Just as Mama had done the night before, Ruth mixed flour, shortening, water, and baking powder together. She sprinkled a little flour onto the table and kneaded the dough. Then Ruth patted the dough flat with the palm of her hand. Janie used the lip of a jelly jar glass to cut out the round biscuits. Ruth put the biscuits on a pan in the oven to bake. But instead of cleaning the table, she lightly spread the leftover flour across the table, forming a thin layer of dust. Janie watched Ruth curiously. When the biscuits were done, the two girls ate them out on the front porch. You won't be able to start school this year, Ruth told Janie between bites, because they closed it. But count your lucky stars. You have me. I will be your teacher. Now run along and go get your friends. Bring them back. They need a lucky star too. Tell their mamas that they need to be here every day, right after breakfast. Soon, Janie and her friends were gathered in the kitchen around the flour-covered table. I know nobody can afford pencils or paper or those luxuries, but count your lucky stars because we have a little flour, announced Ruth. Placing her hand over Janie's hand, Ruth guided Janie's finger through the flour. That's right, go down and curve left like an upside-down cane. That's right, that's the letter J, Ruth patiently told her. Now make an A like this, and she guided Janie's finger. Next, a zigzag line for an N. O and the I. The I is easy, just make a straight line, Ruth said as she made Janie's finger slide through the flour. The E is last, and it goes like this, Ruth stated. Ruth let go of Janie's hand, and all the children looked at the letters that were formed in the flour on the table. That's your name. Janie, Janie, Ruth exclaimed. Ruth smiled at Janie, and Janie smiled back. Okay, so because Mama got a job, Ruth would have to Ruth would have to take care of Janie. So now Ruth is influencing Janie because Ruth is teaching her to read. Then Ruth helped each child write his or her own name in the flour. Soon names were all over the table. Now go home and practice whenever your mamas make your biscuits, Ruth told the children. Mama's job lasted through the fall and the winter and into the warm days of spring. Each morning Ruth made biscuits, and each morning the children came soon after breakfast. Ruth missed going to school, but she loved teaching the children. They learned to write letters and numbers in the flour. They learned to read and write words, and sentences even. Some days they sat on the porch using pebbles. Ruth taught them how to count, then to add and subtract. Then they went back into the house and learned to write arithmetic problems in the flour. The best part of each day Ruth saved for last. After the lessons, Ruth reached up to the shelf above her bed and pulled down one of her big red books. With the children gathered around her, she opened the book and read aloud. She read about history and people and places. She read about plants and animals, oceans and mountains. and she read about the stars. Each day when they finished reading, Ruth turned to the page that showed a picture of a vast black sky dotted with twinkling stars. And each day she would whisper quietly, "Count your lucky stars." Spring was gone, and now it was summertime. Almost a whole year had passed. Ruth still wore the old brown shoes, although they fit a little better now. Papa was still away from home, but the money just kept coming every month. The school would still be closed in the fall, but Janie and the other children were learning to read and to write. And now at night, when Ruth sat out on the porch steps with Mama, she saw how the sky was filled with bright stars. Okay, so now I'm trying to analyze Ruth. I know that Ruth is my protagonist, so I'm trying to decide who is the antagonist, who is against or has an opposite opinion of Ruth. And I don't think it's Mom, and I don't think it's Papa, and I really don't think it's Janie. I think the antagonist in this story is not a character. I think the antagonist is the depression. And these are the things that are working against Janie, or against Ruth and Janie, in this story. So Mama, Papa, and Janie are our secondary characters. And I'm looking, how has Ruth changed since the beginning of the story? What were the influences on Ruth? And I see that at the beginning of the story, Mama had a big influence on her and kept encouraging her and telling her to count her blessings and look at the stars. And then at the end, Ruth was doing that for Janie. And so she saw the blessings and she saw the things that her mom was trying to point out to her. I see that I put something about the neighbor giving giving Ruth shoes. I don't think that's an important influence. That didn't change the way that Ruth was thinking. So that probably doesn't need to be on the visual tool. I can take that out. But I'm looking at the depression, school closing, Ruth taking care of Janie. She can't teach Ruth, or Janie, Mama cannot. So that leaves them stuck without a teacher. The Papa left to work out of the house. I see that, Janie is supposed to be starting school, but it doesn't have anybody to teach her. And so then that changes Ruth's perspective on her situation. And so then her teaching Janie to read then and changes the perspective of the protagonist, and now she's encouraging Janie to count her lucky stars. So that is how our character has developed through these interactions with the people in the story and through the events that are happening around them. Okay, that's it.